Welcome to another edition of ProLongevity. Now, ProLongevity, as you know, is all about living a longer, healthier life. And right now, we're acutely aware of the impact of COVID-19, and we're searching for ways to boost our immunity. And so I'm delighted to have two experts who have gone beyond theory and now have evidence-based approaches. There's Graham Phillips, the founder of ProLongevity, together with Dr Aseem Malhotra. Aseem Malhotra. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Aseem, because we're really honoured to have him chat with us today. He's been known as one of the most influential cardiologists in Britain and internationally. He's an NHS consultant cardiologist, a visiting professor of evidence-based medicine at Bahania School of Medicine and Public Health, Salvador. World-renowned expert in the prevention and diagnosis and management of heart disease, an honorary council member to the Metabolic Psychiatry Clinic at Stanford University School of Medicine, California, and is also the founding member of Action on Sugar, and was the lead campaigner highlighting the harm caused by excess sugar consumption in the UK, particularly its role in type 2 diabetes and obesity, which of course, as we know, drives higher risk of COVID-19. He's developed a dietary regime known as the PIOPI diet, designed to prevent heart disease and lower cholesterol without statins, and he's been quoted as being on a mission to save lives 1 million at a time. Now, together with Graham Phillips, and just in case you don't know about Graham's background, it is almost an equivalent in the world of pharmacy, although he's yet to achieve international fame. He owns an award-winning pharmacy, Manor Pharmacy Group, having undertaken a postgraduate clinical diploma at King's College School of Pharmacy. He was involved with pharmacy policy at a local and national level, including as a member of the Council for the Royal Pharmaceutical Society and the board of the National Pharmacy Association. Graham has a long-term interest in public health, having sat on the board of the National Obesity Forum and as a member of the Healthy Living Pharmacy Reference Group. He's published a paper on the role of community pharmacy in type 2 diabetes that aims to promote much closer working relations with GPs. And he's also recently launched a highly successful lifestyle change program, which is called ProLongevity. And that's designed to tackle obesity, reverse type 2 diabetes and pre-diabetes. And he likes to be known as the pharmacist who gave up drugs. So let me turn to Dr. Aseem Malhotra. Welcome to ProLongevity. You've just published a new book titled The 21-Day Immunity Plan, having previously written the PIOPI diet. Can you explain the basis of both and what you aim to achieve?
Yes, so this book was written in quite a tight, short time period, John. For the purposes of getting a message out to the public, both in the UK and internationally, that we can do something right now to improve our immune resilience, and also to help us in terms of long-term health and reducing risks of conditions that include heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and very likely Alzheimer's and cancer as well, because all these chronic diseases are really what are putting greatest stress on our healthcare systems, but are also bringing, unnecessary misery to millions of people across the globe. And the main premise of both books really was to change the narrative around lifestyle and health, in the sense that changes in lifestyle for many people can have dramatic improvements within a very short space of time in terms of health markers, but also in terms of quality of life. And that comes both from published evidence, but also as a doctor, from my own clinical experience. I follow my own advice, I practice what I preach, I implement this with patients, and what happens to them, the benefits is quite extraordinary, and it's very inspiring for me as a doctor to see people coming off their pills, improving their health markers, and feeling very grateful that they were empowered with this information, which is not really widespread in practice within the medical community. So there's lots of different aspects of the book. One of them is obviously to empower individuals and give them information based upon the latest available evidence. But the other side is also to influence policymakers, because I know that ultimately, if we're going to really improve population health, and my main focus primarily is to help the population and reduce stress on the healthcare system, we need policy changes for that to happen. And the people that can do that, ultimately, the people that have the greatest power to influence that are the politicians. So, this 21-day immunity plan, the forward is written by the former deputy leader of the Labour Party, Tom Watson, who had been helped by following my advice from the previous book. And I'd had direct contact, both before and after the book was published, with Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, Matt Hancock, who had asked me to advise him on the links between COVID-19 and obesity.
So, Graham, you're at the community end of the world of healthcare in the UK. What do you think the impact of this book will be, especially on some of the bodies that decide policy?
But you'll have seen me nodding away furiously while Aseem was talking. We've known each other for a very long time from my days on the board of the National Obesity Forum. And I share his passion for a preventive public health approach. I mean, our current approach is all about, and this is how all health professionals are trained, which is essentially to identify symptoms and not even cure them. We basically suppress the symptoms with drugs. So, we wait for people to become hypertensive, we give them an antihypertensive, but we're only suppressing the problem, because if you stop taking the medication, the problem comes back. The potential here is enormous. Let's sort of take a stand back and just think. Life expectancy, both in the UK and in America and in Germany, is currently going backwards. And that is the core judge that we all, criteria for health systems, not how well we live, but how long we live. Even on that core criteria, and despite the incredible amount of money that's being pumped into health, all the health systems, people are actually living shorter lives. I think this could be revolutionary. If we can get people to understand that 80, maybe 90% of healthy longevity, so not just how long we live, but how well we live, is under our own control and doesn't require medical intervention, and we can re-educate the public and re-educate health professionals, it can be absolutely transformative.
So, Aseem, Graham has got the nom de plume of being the pharmacist who gave up drugs. Is that a title that you aspire to for cardiologists?
It's a great title, and I've got a lot of respect, and I commend Graham for what he's done and what he's doing, because we need more and more people like Graham to be banging this drum about preventive healthcare, and also about the limitations of modern medicine. More and more people are becoming aware of the fact that a lot of these drugs, they do have very marginal benefits at best. Graham talks about hypertension. It's a very interesting one. I talk about this in the book. Most people, just over half probably of the people taking blood pressure pills in this country certainly, are being prescribed it for mild hypertension. So just to break it down, mild hypertension is basically having a systolic blood pressure between 140 and 160. Systolic and diastolic, essentially anything between 90 and 100. And for mild hypertension, there is no real clear benefit from taking medications in terms of preventing heart attack, stroke, or death. Yet most people are taking it with the belief that that's what's going to help them. So the clinical evidence doesn't show any real benefit. The benefit for blood pressure pills doesn't mean blood pressure pills are not, don't have a use. The real benefit is for moderate and severe hypertension. So we've got this kind of huge cohort of people who are taking these blood pressure pills, as Graham's already highlighted, for so-called symptomatic, treating the symptoms or the end result of in many cases lifestyle-related issues, which isn't going to benefit them. It may give them side effects. And if you combine that with at the same time, John, with not addressing lifestyle issues, then if you look at that, say that particular individual patient, who thinks that he's on the blood pressure pill and he can eat what he likes, etc., etc., he's got an illusion of protection, if you like. And actually, in essence, that could then end up causing net harm. So it's not that we're not doing little or just very little. We could actually be harming patients with this approach in modern medicine. And we see the same thing with statins. There's data showing that people low risk of heart disease, taking statins, who won't have any prolongation of life, use it as an illusion of protection. They think their cholesterol is okay, and therefore they then go and eat burger and fries and become overweight or obese. And that there is data actually supporting that. There's published evidence showing that's what happens over a 10-year period in many people. So this is really what's at the root cause of our healthcare crisis. This sort of approach, this mentality, and what we need to do is really take a step back, appreciate the limitations of modern medicine. Doesn't say we haven't got a role at all. I think modern medicine does a lot of good things, mainly in acute care. But the biggest stress on our healthcare system is managing chronic diseases. And the forefront of managing that has to be through lifestyle changes, but it's not being prescribed in primary care, and that's what we need to change. We need to change this praxis across the whole board, and I think pharmacists, probably have an even greater role potentially than.
Okay, so there's, if you like, a little bit of noise coming back at you from social media, particularly from places like Twitter. How do you respond to some of the claims that the position that you take might be snake oil?
Yeah, so I think I'd start, John, by saying that let's just take a step back here, rather than point fingers at individuals. Of course, there are different people. There are always going to be unsavory characters, even within medicine. But the majority of doctors and healthcare professionals genuinely go into, especially in the NHS, go into the job to really help their patients. So I think this is a symptomatic of, to call this snake oil or whatever is just ridiculous. It's silly. It's not evidence-based to say something like that. In fact, what we're doing is promoting the best available evidence to help patients have improved quality of life. But to try and understand what's going on, I think really one of the, I quote Simon Chapman. So Simon Chapman, for many people listening won't know who he is. He was probably the professor of psychology, and he was, public health professor in Australia. He was regarded as the single most important campaigner in highlighting or reducing tobacco consumption in Australia by, campaigning and getting regulations introduced. And one of his quotes in the talks that I give, he gives a 10-point plan about lessons during his 38 year in public health advocacy, because ultimately, what I'm doing, what Graham is doing is really, in a way, is being advocates for public health. And he says, you've got to grow a rhinoceros hide, have a thick skin, because as soon as your work threatens an ideological cabal or an industry, you will be attacked, sometimes unrelentingly and viciously. So I have, you've got to have a thick skin when you're doing things, trying to change the system. And, again, to put things in perspective, John, the reality is this, and I can back it up and debate this with anybody, anywhere, anytime. You bring on the most hardcore journalist to challenge me on this, and I can absolutely, totally back this up. Right now, we're living in a system of health misinformation, which basically means we've got, in universal deceit. And in a time of universal deceit, I said this on BBC Radio 5 Live yesterday, telling the truth is a revolutionary and controversial act. So because of that, many people are going to react because they're not aware. They haven't dug deep to see what's going on. And they may also, without knowing the deep background of people like me or Graham or whatever, they may also question motives of people coming up and making, statements that they have absolutely no understanding or knowledge of. And then their instant reaction is to suggest this is some sort of self-interested, promotion of something for, some hidden agenda. And the way to do that is you just smear and attack and use words like snake oil. But all they're doing is exposing their ignorance, John, to be honest. Yeah. And I use that as fuel just to think, okay, well, actually, we've still got all the work to do. But anyone who's reasonable, who's got understands they've got responsibility to scientific integrity and duty to their patients, is going to take it on board and gonna hopefully act on it. And that's what we need. I think people intuitively know, John, that there's something wrong right now with the healthcare system, with society, with the way things are going. And at the root of all of this is essentially there is too much power and commercial influence over health information.
Yeah. So the key is evidence. I'm going to turn to Graham. And Graham, in terms of your own work, what evidence have you amassed, particularly in helping people reduce their risk of succumbing to COVID-19?
So, if I think back, and each of us who's come to this point probably has a personal journey. I know Aseem has, and I know David Anwin has. That you know, as Aseem says, you start thinking you're going to do your best for patients, and you get to a certain point in your profession, you think, actually, I'm not really achieving very much. I'm not helping people very much, and you know, I'm not doing as much good as I thought. And I spent 5-7 years going back through all the fundamental science I learned, and I realised that I kind of bought into this sort of system of chronic illness is inevitable, it's going to happen, and all you can do is wait for it to happen and then treat it with drugs. And I realised that that's not fundamentally based in science or humanity or human biology. And in fact, when you look at the science, you realise that a diet, typical, we call it the standard American diet, or SAD, which is very appropriate, and our diet is very much the same, and our lifestyle in the UK is very much the same. A diet higher in sugar and carbs and processed foods, we're just not adapted for it. We're not adapted to all the stress and the lack of sleep. And when you start to look at the root cause of all these problems, you realise that there are basically a unifying root cause. Essentially, if your diet is continually raising your blood glucose, you will spike your insulin. And it's that raised insulin in turn that drives the whole process. And it's entirely based on science. I mean, we've got this knowledge now down to the molecular level, even down to the level of electron transport within the mitochondria. And the mitochondria is the battery of the cell. So it's an absolutely complete evidence base of how it's caused. And then there's a very complete evidence base that when you sort of unpick the whole thing and reverse the lifestyle, the whole process reverses itself. So this isn't hearsay or snake oil. This is fundamental science and cell biology.
And have you got any particular case studies recently that you think are significant and remarkable?
Well, there's a couple on my website, but one in particular actually is a guy I know by the name of John Allard, who might tell his own story at this point. So if you're not too shy, John, perhaps you'd sort of come out of the closet and tell us a little bit what happened to you.
Well, you know, I think we were doing an interview, weren't we, a few months ago, and you pointed out that I wasn't looking in good health. But to cut a long story short, you caught me just on the point where I was about to have either a stroke or a heart attack. So I had extremely high blood pressure, and my GP, I had the experience of the GP not understanding. So we'll come on to the question of knowledge, but I was thrown out of the GP surgery believing that I was susceptible to people selling snake oil, and you then encouraged me to go to the urgent care centre, who promptly admitted me and put me on double blood pressure medication, which 10 to 12 weeks later I think I was off. So I think I'm a case study, having lost the best part of 3 stone.
If I could just come in there briefly, John. So you were in what's termed hypertensive crisis. And you ask any medical professional what happens, inevitably you'll end up on 2, if not 3 different antihypertensives to control that. You never ended up on more than the full dose of one antihypertensive. Within 4 weeks or 6 weeks, you were down to half a dose. And within 12 to 14 weeks, you were off all drugs. And now you've got the blood pressure of a 20-year-old. We never ever see that in medicine with our conventional interventions.
If I can just return to Aseem. Aseem, just in terms of the investment that's going on as a result of COVID-19. So we're seeing what I would term sticking plaster solutions. We've had great news about gastric bands, and special milkshakes, I think, is a new one. And we've got pictures of Boris.
We'll call it out for what it is, yeah. Ultra-processed, low-calorie shakes. But
so the food industry is piling in there, having spotted an opportunity. And of course, the Prime Minister is now employing a personal coach to try and outrun a bad diet. So the question is, do health professionals, particularly those advising the government at the top, and if your book is aimed at changing policy, how is the education process going? Your book obviously is just one aspect. It seems to me to be a very large amount of education that needs to be done.
Absolutely, John. So I've campaigned for many years on lots of different issues and written letters and made the news. And one of the things that I did was a few years ago is basically write to the chair of the GMC as well as the chair of the Medical Students' Council, saying that we need compulsory lifestyle and nutrition education within medical school. But things take time. They responded affirmatively saying they agree. But there's been very little implementation as far as I know so far. I think Bristol is one university where they've got it into the curriculum. So there's things that are moving, but it's moving too slow. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, I have built up a network because of my work more than anything else, of keeping connections and relationships with politicians across all parties, and formed very good relationships with them. And one thing I've learned, John, is that, those politicians can't do it on their own. Even Matt Hancock, he's fully on board. He gets it. He followed the Piopi diet advice and managed to lose 2 or 3 stone in weight, So, but that isn't enough. So one of the things I say, and I've written about, in fact, another article, is that the science alone is not enough. Opposition from vested interests needs to be overcome. Now, it doesn't mean we shouldn't lobby and we shouldn't have direct contact with people in influence. I've met Jeremy Hunt as part of Action on Sugar to give him the plan around child obesity, and after that, and with all various things going on, we brought sugary drinks. The government brought sugary drinks tax in, but I don't think our meeting was really what pushed it so much. It was definitely a help. It was actually the mainstream media getting behind it. And for me, when we launched Action on Sugar, as soon as the Daily Mail, which is the one paper that probably has the biggest influence over this government, put on their front page sugar is a new tobacco, it was really game over. In terms of we had already won the battle, because that was the sort of tipping point for people, because ultimately the media has a lot of control over this, and they have that platform to get information out, potentially correct and honest and information out to the public, highlight injustices, and then public opinion shifts, and that helps the politicians then make decisions where they think actually politically it's in their interest to do such things. But we're constantly up against the fact that there are so many lobbyists from the drug industry, from the food industry, who behind the scenes are influencing, having financial influence on many of these policymakers. This is a challenge we have now. What do? We can either become apathetic and say there's nothing we can do about it, or we realize that we actually collectively it's all in our interest to help the population get healthier, but we also all have a role, and we have some power individually if we speak out together to make these changes happen. So, these sorts of social changes and revolutions do take time, but I think that the more people that become aware, the more people realize that there is really, in essence, a gross injustice being inflicted upon patients, upon doctors, upon the public because of misinformation, people will not find that acceptable. Sure. And when they realize that, then people start deciding that they're going to do something about it. That was my story, essentially. That's, it was me realizing something was very, very wrong with, and being, both a very analytical in terms of, my mindset in thinking of the science, but also being very sensitive as a frontline doctor to the fact that we were seeing more and more people coming in with chronic disease over the years since I qualified. I realized what was at the root of it, and being enlightened and knowing exactly what was going on, and even being told at the very highest level, John, that this isn't like suspicion, this isn't conspiracy theories, it's the way business is done. Somebody very senior, I won't name, extremely senior politician said to me once, when I was telling him about, concerns about a specific drug that's been used for, well over a decade in the NHS, which is probably causing way more harm than any good, and may have killed maybe 3,000 people in the NHS unnecessarily. When I talked to him about the concerns around this particular drug, he took it on board. And the first thing he said to me, Aseem, the Department of Health is too close to industry. That was enough for me. He looked me in the eye. That was enough for me to know what's going on. right?
Yeah.
So I think once people become aware of those system failures, which most doctors aren't aware of, by the way, then we can change things.
If I could just bring both of you to discuss how the forces for good can join together, from community to hospital consultants.
I think, John, I think Aseem's right. Just remember, 50 years ago, there are regular adverts in the GP press and in the national press. Smoke the brand of cigarettes that your doctor smokes. And it was 1994 that the chief executives of the 5 big tobacco companies all appeared in front of the Senate. And all 5 of them swore that in their best understanding of the science, there was no link between smoking and lung cancer. Not 1934, not 1954, 1994, it's still on YouTube. I don't think we've got, but they know the truth for 40, 50 years. And yet now, far, far more people are dying of cancer, dementia, diabetes, cardiovascular disease than were ever dying of lung cancer. So there's an absolute imperative to deal with this, and I don't think we can afford to wait another 40, 50 years. So we have to create a social movement for change. And there's a movement that both Aseem and I are involved in called the Public Health Collaboration. It brings together health professionals and lay members and concerned members of the public who believe that lifestyle changes, it should be front and center. It's not because we're misportrayed as anti-vaxxers or anti-statins or lunatics. We're not. We're all founded in the science. We also understand there's a balance between what medicine can do and medication can do and what people can do for themselves. And when you say to people, 80% of a healthy long life is under your own personal control, maybe 90%, and here's the tools. How empowering is that? So I think we need to create a social movement for change. We need to grow this movement across all health professionals, not just pharmacy, not just medicine, but across all the health professionals. We need to lobby both at the national and the local level. And in the end, the science will come good. You can't deny the science, and we've got the science on our side.
And Aseem, your view in terms of how the forces for good can unite, any good news that you can see out there?
No, I think, listen, I think that the movement is happening, it's growing. I think people have to realize that there will be resistance just because of these powerful vested interests that benefit from the status quo, if you like. And we're trying to really ultimately create a new order here. And that isn't easy. Yeah. To summarize, I quote, Mahatma Gandhi, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win. So that always kind of keeps me motivated. When these battles and tussles are going on, I kind of just think, actually, I take a step back. This is a backhanded compliment. As soon as the powerful vested interests try and undermine the message that we're doing, it means that we're having impact. Yeah. So I think Graham's right. I think what we've created and what's happening is a big social movement. I think the fact that what's really powerful are the patient stories, a story like your story, John. These stories and many people that I've seen and written about and my own patients I try and highlight. And this isn't about N=1 poor evidence. It's about that patient story and then going into the wider evidence space, like what's happening here? Why is this patient getting better coming off the pills? Actually, because the evidence suggests if you do this, if you do X, Y will happen. So I think there's definitely that and that public education is really important. But to make the real change happen, we also need to concentrate on the top as well. So we need to influence the policymakers. The politicians need to be aware. I highlighted, obviously, Boris Johnson got sick because of he probably got sick from COVID and went to hospital because of his weight. It was an observation. I said it's very likely a big factor. It became a news story. Then, Boris responded. Matt Hancock contacted me. These are the sorts of things that resonate with people, the personal stories. And I think they're very powerful. But ultimately, for the change to happen, you've got this grassroots movement. And when that meets top-down change in the middle, then you've got a revolution. And that's what we need to just keep our minds on, that we're influencing both the grassroots movement, helping many people. But once and this exactly, the tobacco analogy is a great one, because, 50 years between the first links between smoking and lung cancer were published before we had effective regulatory policies, that stopped the manipulations and excesses of the tobacco industry. But the reason it took 50 years, which we haven't got now, I don't think we've got that much time in terms of the kind of, the metabolic toxic types of foods that we're consuming. is because the big tobacco adopted a corporate playbook, if you like, described as dirty tricks by Professor Kelly Brownell in Duke in University in the United States. They adopted this corporate playbook of planting doubt, confusing the public, denial, as Graham's highlighted, in terms of the CEOs swearing under oath they didn't think that nicotine was addictive and smoking caused lung cancer, even as late as 1994, and they swore under oath before Congress. But for me, the worst part, I think, is that they were able to buy the loyalty of scientists. And I think we have to just acknowledge, and it's not something we should ignore, we should just acknowledge the fact that part of this problem that exists at the moment wouldn't have happened, or would have been much less likely to happen, if it wasn't for the acquiescence, complicity of very influential and powerful doctors and scientists. In one of the talks I give, I quote cardiologist Peter Wilmshurst, who's done a lot of work exposing, scientific fraud in a long career, and very brave, courageous man. And he says that the real scandal is that doctors, medical institutions, and scientists that have a responsibility and duty to patients and scientific integrity collude with industry for financial gain. And, I think that people just need to be aware of what's going on, because, these industries, the way the system is geared, whether it's pharma or the big food, they are profit-making businesses. They are there. They have a fiduciary legal obligation to make profit for their shareholders. They don't have any real legal obligation to look after your health. But it's about the regulators. It's about the people that have the power to stop them having too much influence when it comes to guidelines or prescriptions, etc., for the purposes of profit. That's where the real problem lies. So I think that we have to put our hands up. We're all guilty of it collectively. And I think for me, once I became aware of this, once people listening become aware of it and understand it, to then not speak out makes me part of the problem, John. In my conscience, when I go to bed at night, it makes me part of the problem if I'm not responding and doing something about it. Now, it's not easy. I know that for everybody to do it. And I've got a platform and I'm a cardiologist and all that kind of stuff. But all of us have a role to play in changing.
So Aseem, the 21-day immunity plan looks like an excellent manifesto. I've just got it up on screen, and you're getting some good accolades. I noted when I was doing my research, I think Jeremy Vine is saying great things about it, and you've got Robert Lustig as well. I think Jeremy Vine said it's brilliant, hard to change your life, but this book gives you all the reasons it's possible, from the first page to the last, one revelation after another. You must be pretty happy with that sort of feedback at the moment.
Yes, John, absolutely. In fact, when I was writing it, I always, throughout my work, I've always sought, views from other experts, from people who have, more detailed knowledge of very specific topics, to make sure that what I'm saying is robust, it's accurate, and making sure I'm not missing anything out. But at the same time, Jeremy Vine, who I've known for a while, is a very articulate, exceptional broadcast journalist, a very decent man. And, to have him to give that kind of quote for me was, I was blown away, to be honest. I didn't expect it to be that strong and helpful. So, it does reassure me. And also for Jeremy in particular, people say, well, hold on, he's not a doctor or scientist. It has to hit the middle person as well. Like, what does the average middle class intelligent person reading this, what do they think? And Jeremy was certainly one of the people I reached out to, but also I got reviews from a number of different people, from well-known scientists, respected Professor Karol Sikora, advisor to the World Health Organization, the lead person for cancer for many years, and he's a dean of a medical school, and he said there's no kind of quackery here or whatever. He said this is as mainstream as it gets. I mean, he was absolutely extremely supportive and positive in the full quotation that he gave on the book as well. And I don't know Karol Sikora very well. I hadn't even had much interaction with him beforehand. But the reason I'm saying this is that, it was good for me just to throw it out to somebody that I respect a lot to see what do you think. And that's what he came back with. He didn't suggest any changes. And of course, dietitians and nutritionists as well, from the BDA, Dwayne Meller, who actually, interestingly, over the years, we've had a few tussles in terms of arguing around issues on sugar and saturated fat, but we've come together, and I've got a lot of respect for his knowledge. And he was also very helpful and supportive with his comments. So it's I think that I tried to cover as many bases as possible. You can't please everybody, but we've got enough strong advocates and people with a lot of respectability that I think helps me, and it helps other people realize that this isn't just a single lone voice. Because ultimately we've got there's a lot of people involved in this who have contributed considerably to this movement, and it's important to keep that sort of connectivity with various people. And just to add on to that, Gurinder Chadha, who's a film director who many people will know of the movie Bend It Like Beckham, she was a director for that. She'd struggled with her weight and type 2 diabetes for a very long time, and we were in touch over the lockdown period. And I basically gave the advice that I gave her in the book, and she's practically reversed her type 2 diabetes and lost a lot of weight and feeling great because of it. So she's been a strong advocate. There are other patients, for example, Deborah Scott, who actually contracted COVID, but had gone into remission in type 2 diabetes before then, and been someone that's followed my work and the work of people like David Unwin for years. So she was very supportive and helpful, and feels herself that because her diabetes was essentially in remission, she avoided a hospital admission. So there are lots of various people who have contributed and helped with the book. But yeah, I'm delighted, to be honest, John. It's it's a bestseller already. It's a Sunday Times bestseller list already. So that's good. It's great for me. It's a personal achievement. But the bigger issue for me is I'd rather this sell 10,000 books and influence policy change so that people who've never even heard of me can benefit from the advice of the book, than sell 1 million copies and that not happen.
It sounds to me that what you're helping lead is the formation of a new moral majority, just in the same way as won the battle against cigarette companies. So I guess, Graham, you need to do a book as well, don't you?
No current plans to do so, but I've had a number of people tell me that it is something that I should do. I guess,
Graham, very quickly, sorry to interrupt. Just a thought. I think a great title for a book, I think you know it already, The Pharmacist Who Gave Up Drugs. That's a bestseller for sure. That will get a lot of attention, definitely.
My partner, who's a GP, keeps telling me that I should do that. But on a slightly more serious note, as fast as Aseem and other good people like him come out with these very positive messages, the public is then absolutely barraged with all the opposite information by the vested interests of particularly processed food. And obviously, I'm not saying there's a deliberate allegiance between the big food industry and the pharma industry, but I mean, I often tweet because of the poor quality of the food in the NHS. Does the NHS have shares in type 2 diabetes? And Aseem's frequently highlighted the fact that NHS hospitals are branding opportunities for processed food. So as fast as someone like Aseem comes out with this really positive, empowering messages, the public the next day hears 100 contrary messages. And that's what I find with the ProLongevity service, is that people get the fundamental principle. In theory, they could read Aseem's book and sort themselves out, and many people will. But for a lot of people, they need a lot more hand-holding, a lot more support, a lot more personalisation and an individual approach. And I think that's where a service like ProLongevity comes in, because you can see what's going on in your own body. You can see how different foods actually spike your sugars, but you wouldn't know it, and how your diet and lifestyle affects you. And then you need, I kind of think I'm a great believer in technology, but everyone needs a guide. And what I'm able to do is provide that personalised guidance to keep people in the right direction, not be buffeted by the side winds of, pharma companies and processed foods, and keep their eye on the target. And we see remarkable results. So there's a kind of natural alliance of what both of us are doing.
Well, I think I'm living proof that is possible. Obviously, Aseem, thank you so much for giving us some time. I know that it's been a sort of daily tour of as many radio and television stations, so we're very lucky to actually get an interview with you. But from myself and Graham, thank you so much.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Graham. My pleasure.
Cheers, Aseem. Take care.